dehumanization is such a tough term, okay, but keeping an emotional distance from your patients is essential to our work. You learn it. I remember my first day in medical school in anatomy class. I'm facing a corpse, and the first 3-hour exercise is to skin this corpse, certain parts of the corpse. And you start learning from that first day. This isn't, mine happened to be a woman. You know, yes, I intellectually know that she's probably a mother and a wife and a sister and all of these things, but today she's a collection of nerves, arteries, and muscles. And there is a certain professional distance that must be maintained professionally. On the other hand, that distance can get a little bit too far. And you're right. And, you know, in terms of abortion, I'm just doing a medical procedure. I'm just helping this woman.
Right. And you got to keep telling yourself.
Well, you tell yourself that, but, and you know, say, I'm not actually tearing babies apart. But then again, at the end of even a suction D&C abortion, you do a suction machine, there's a little stocking in there that collects parts. At the end of the procedure, you have to take that, open that up, empty it, and literally take inventory to make sure that you got 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. So you tell yourself that day in and day out, but you're faced with the reality of it every single procedure you do.
The overwhelming majority of abortions in the United States are what we call surgical abortions, and the majority of those surgical abortions are performed in the first trimester, so before 14 weeks gestation. Those abortions are called D&C abortions. It's done through suction. When a surgical abortion is committed, first and foremost, we have to know how far along the woman is in her pregnancy. And that is generally done by getting a gestational measurement through ultrasound. Now, this ultrasound is not used during the abortion procedure. It is only used before the abortion begins. And it's just to capture that gestational size. That helps us determine what size instrumentation that we're going to need. But the medical professional is going to come in, and he's going to sit down. He's going to begin the abortion procedure by artificially dilating the woman's cervix. So what you hope happens naturally during childbirth, the dilation of a woman's cervix, he's going to force that to happen artificially by using graduated metal dilation rods. And he's going to insert those into the woman's uterus until he thinks he has the cervix soft and dilated enough to insert a suction cannula. And this cannula is, it's sort of like a straw, and it's attached to a suction machine. And he's going to take that suction cannula and he's going to insert it into the woman's uterus, and he's going to blindly poke around and probe around and twist inside of her uterus until he has enough blood and tissue in a glass jar, suctioned into a glass jar. And that glass jar is then going to go into a lab called the POC lab. Now, POC stands for products of conception. Of course, the product of conception is the baby, but you can't say baby inside of an abortion clinic. So we said POC or POC, or if the staff was feeling funny, they would say that it stood for pieces of children. And inside of that POC lab is a POC technician, and her job is to take everything that has been evacuated out of the uterus and into that glass jar, and she's going to take all of the contents of that jar and she's going to dump it into a glass baking dish, and she's looking to reassemble the parts of the baby. We needed to ensure that all of the parts that were inside of her uterus are now outside of her uterus, because if we left a leg or part of the head or part of the spine or an arm inside of that woman's uterus, she could develop a very serious infection that could actually be fatal. After all of the parts were accounted for, then that technician is going to take everything and she's going to put it into a red biohazard Ziploc sort of bag. And at the end of the day, all of those bags of babies are going to go into a freezer that's located in the POC lab. And that freezer, the staff used to jokingly call the nursery. And that is how abortion takes place by and large, day in, day out, about 2,000 times a day in the United States.
We were charging for a first trimester abortion. We were charging maybe, and again, this was early 80s, but $300 to maybe $500, depending on how far along you were. There was more if we were doing a second trimester abortion. That's a whole nother story.
Right.
But I could do an abortion in 15 minutes. If I did 3 abortions, I made just as much as I made with all those months of effort with the obstetrics. And I'm done in less than an hour, and I could be on the golf course, in no time flat, and face essentially no legal liability.
Yeah.
Because, things do happen during abortions,
Yeah.
but it was relatively rare to get a lawsuit because no woman wants to sit in a court of law and talk about her abortion.
We made sure that the woman was sedated before the ultrasound was even done. We weren't going to give her the opportunity to look at her ultrasound. And we needed her sedated for that because we couldn't take a chance. We weren't even going to tell her we were doing an ultrasound. So we needed her sedated because we couldn't take a chance on her popping her head up and seeing what was on that ultrasound image. Because the ultrasound would then expose the lie of the abortion industry. It would show the woman that inside of her womb is a living human being with a beating heart.
When I showed up at OR number 9 at Albany Medical Center, and I was doing second trimester abortions up to 24 weeks at the time, and I arrived at the hospital to do a second trimester D&E abortion, and these are absolutely gruesome procedures. Because you're not talking about a baby an inch long anymore.
Right.
A 20-week baby is the length of your hand, from the tip of your middle finger to your wrist. That's head to rump, 20 weeks, not counting the legs. And you're tearing these kids apart literally bit by bit with the instruments. I wasn't even thinking of this as anything special. This was routine. I obviously had other things on my mind. So I went in and I started the abortion, and I literally ripped out an arm or a leg, as I had over 100 times before in second trimester abortions, and I just stared at it in the clamp, and I got sick. But when you start an abortion, you can't stop. I said earlier, you have to keep inventory. You have to make sure that you get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Because if you don't, your patient will come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I finished the abortion, and now we're talking a big baby here, not some little tiny one. And you literally stack parts on the side of the table so you can keep inventory. And for the first time in my career, and I know it sounds strange to people, but we always promise telling people that everything we're saying is firsthand and true. For the first time, I looked. I really, really looked at that pile of body parts. And I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see what a great doctor I was helping her out, and I didn't even see the $800 cash I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter.
Wow.
And it occurred to me in that instant, that this patient had come to me, figuratively, never literally, and said, here's $800, kill my son or daughter. And I was the kind of person that would look her right in the eye and with no compunction whatsoever say, sure, I'll do that.
We're not talking about salt of the earth people here. We're talking about people who are manipulative and are willing to exploit vulnerable women for cash. That's what they do every day. That's what we did every day. They don't have to treat these women fairly or they don't have to be kind to women. They can treat them however they want. Because they essentially run a monopoly on a product that women believe that they need. And these women are willing to take whatever abuses, emotionally, physically, dirty equipment, unsterilized instruments, untrained staff, medical negligence. They'll take anything. They'll take any abuse you give them in order to get that product they feel like they so desperately need. Abortion entities will always talk about abortion being safe. that, abortion is a gentle procedure performed inside of the uterus. But the reality that we know to be true is that abortion, really on its face, can never be safe, because in order for an abortion to be deemed successful, a unique and individual human being must be killed. And that is the antithesis of safety, and that is why abortion can never, ever be considered health care.